I'm Kimberly with the Fat Quarter Shop here with Lisa Bongean of Primitive Gatherings, and she's going to show us how to do single fold binding since mini quilts are so popular. So let's get started.
First, trim your quilt even with the border. I use the lines from the navy as a gauge.
Okay.
Now it's time for single fold binding. What we're going to do for single fold binding is we're going to measure the perimeter of your little quilt, whatever it may be, and I add about 10 inches to make sure I have enough to make it all the way around with all the miters. For this binding, I am going to stitch it on with the Aurifil navy thread here, and then single fold is mainly what you would use on a little quilt, meaning it's not folded in half and then applied onto the quilt. It's just we're going to apply it like so. I cut my binding 1.25 inches wide for single fold and then joined them together on the diagonal and press the seam open. Now it's time to apply the binding. I'm going to lay the binding down on the edge. I'm going to leave about 8 inches of tail, so I will start sewing right about here, and I'm going to end 1/4 inch, and I'm going to put a little pin right at my 1/4 inch so I know where to stop. Now I'm going to place the quilt under the presser foot, leaving my tail. Alrighty, so as you see, I placed my 1/4 inch seam guide back on. I'm going to stitch at about 2. I'm going to stitch right to the pin. Once I get to the pin, I'm going to lift my presser foot, pivot, take my pin out, and then I sew right off the quilt. At this point, I'm going to miter. Now I'm going to start stitching from the edge all the way down, and I'm going to do all 4 corners like this. Now here's where the magic happens. I want you to lay this beginning tail nice and tight down, and then the ending tail we are going to take and lay directly on top of it. Then I'm going to take a pin, and right where my beginning tail is, I'm going to put my pin right there, but I'm going to move it up just a little bit, and that's going to snuggle in a little bit tighter. So now I'm going to open this up, and right where my pin is, I'm going to put the point of the beginning strip. I'm going to remove my pin and just put my pin in there to hold those two together. And now I'm going to stitch this diagonal right here. After we remove it from the machine, we're going to lay it down, and we want to double check before we cut anything to make sure that the miter is perfect, which it is. Now I'm going to take this, trim off the excess. Here I'm going to trim off 1/4 inch away, lay it flat, and just with my fingernail I'm going to open this up and press it, and now I'm going to stitch from here to here. Now it's time to do the hand stitching. Normally, if I was going to stitch this, I would use the Aurifil 40 weight navy thread for a perfect blind invisible hand stitch that you wouldn't see. But today, so you guys can see what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to use this cream thread so you can stitch. My thread is single, it's not double. The needle I am using in number 11 straw. I'm going to take the binding from the front side, fold it to meet the edge of the quilt, give it a little finger press, make sure I got it all, and then I'm going to fold it over one more time and put a little binding clip to hold it in secure. Then I'm going to move over a little bit and do that along the way. All right, I'm going to remove the first clip. I'm going to stitch inside the edge where you won't see that. That's where I'm going to bury my tail. I'm going to grab the edge of the fold, and then I'm going to enter into the quilt directly below the fold, taking a little bite and coming over about a little bit bigger than an eighth, or about an eighth. I place the needle again into the quilt, stitch up into the fold, and all my stitch does is just loop around the fold, and then when I pull it tight, it sinks in. And I can even make this white thread disappear. Needle again placed directly below into the quilt from the fold, slide it over up into the fold, and that's what we would do all the way around. This Orville thread is a 40 weight. It's a little bit heavier for binding. You want your binding sewn with a little bit thicker thread so it can take the abuse that the edges of our quilts take. Now obviously this one isn't going to take much abuse, but just get in the habit of stitching your bindings with 40 weight or a thicker thread. And that's how we do the hand stitching of the binding. And I'm just going to quickly just flip it over so you can see that it's a 1/4 inch on the front and it'll be a 1/4 inch on the back. And that's what we want with our bindings. After our binding is all hand stitched, we are going to take the fabric from the kit and cut a 1 by 10 inch scarf with our pinking blade, tie it in a knot, try to get the right sides facing up, place the little knot on the edge of his scarf, and then I would just take the sewing machine and inside the little fold there, do some straight stitches, tacking it all in place. And then it's ready and everything's done, and it was quite simple.